I'd like to begin with a story, and please comment below and see if it's your own personal experience as well. You see, as a child, when we were 5 years old, we used to think, well, my mom knows everything. By the time we're 12 years old, we think, well, mom doesn't know everything. By the time we're 14 years old, we think, well, mom can't do anything. By the time we're 16, we're thinking, mom, you're embarrassing me, right? Go away. By the time we're 18, we think, wow, mom is so old school, so old fashioned. She's so outdated. Now we go away to college, and then at around 25 years old, we think to ourselves, well, mom does know a few things. And then by the time we're 35 years old, we, before deciding something, ask for the opinion of our mother. And then by the time we're 45 years old, we would constantly think about, okay, well, what would mom do? What would mom think, right? By the time we're 55 years old, we'd say something like, well, I wish I could spend more time with my mother. And then by the time we're 65 years old, we would say something like, well, I wish I could talk to my mom just one last time, just one more time. Some of you probably have the feeling you missed your mother because she's no longer here on earth. And so please pray for them. It's only when we become parents ourselves that we realize our parents' love for us. You see, in the United States of America, on the second Sunday in May, we celebrate Mother's Day. And you can learn all about the history of Mother's Day in this special day by doing a Google search. But I simply want to emphasize this one point, and that is in every single age, in every society, in every civilization, there's always a celebration of Mother's Day and Father's Day too, right? In other words, our parents, in some way, form, or another. Because believe it or not, the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, all the other civilizations we can think of, they have some form of celebration of our parents. You see, all the celebration of parents has its roots and traces in every civilization and society to this very, very event because it's so natural, right? It's in the natural order of life. So those years of parenthood, when we're parents ourselves, can be difficult because there's so much work, there's so much sacrifice. But by the time you become grandparents, you realize it's all worth it. Because being grandparents is much better than being parents. And so I want to take this opportunity to wish all of you a very happy and blessed Mother's Day. And especially for those soon-to-be mothers out there, may God bless you on your journey to motherhood. Marriage is a vocation, just like fatherhood is fatherhood or motherhood is a vocation. And if you embrace the vocation, if you do your best, you'll find the greatest joy, right? This joy in the vocation as a parent, right? Something like this is so special that we treasure, every moment in our lives. And so I encourage you, say a prayer recognizing, yes, that you are imperfect, that you struggle with many different things, but that you ask the Lord for the strength, the patience, the endurance, the courage to be good parents and loving parents. Now, with that being said, I'd like to share with you 7 very important things about a good mother. And keep in mind, there's always room for improvement, and that's what life is all about. And before we get started too, I just invite you to please subscribe to this channel down here below if you wish to receive weekly reflections on the scriptures or weekly lessons on catechesis and on faith. So let's go ahead and begin. We'll start with number 7. We'll go down to number 1. Number 7, being a good role model for your child. What does this mean? Well, as a mother, your child looks up to you for everything. How you behave, how you act, how you do things have a profound impact on your child. For example, if you feel angry all the time and you show it, of course your child's gonna show that as well. If you dress inappropriately, well, guess what? Your child's probably gonna do the same thing. If you disrespect, if you gossip, if you do bad things to others, well, guess what? Same thing. if you lie, cheat, and steal in front of your child, well, sooner or later, your child is going to do that as well. Now, let's take the opposite approach. If you always encourage and inspire your child, soon your child will be motivated to succeed. It's going through tough situations when your child's going through a rough time that you help them through it and that they'll remember. If you show love, if you're generous, if you have faith, if you're filled with faith and hope, eventually your child will too. Now, I have a lady who came up to me and says, well, but Father, I never drink or smoke. How is it possible that my child drinks and smokes? I'll probably learned it from his father. But again, number 7, be a good role model for your child. Let's move on to number 6. Number 6, do not be overly controlling. This is so important. Do not be overly controlling. Well, what does this mean? Well, give your child enough freedom based on their age, right? Let me give you a perfect example. When I was a parish priest, we had a field trip. The parish was organizing, and it was for a group of 9th grade students, so 14-year-olds. And I remember this very clearly because one of the mother found it very necessary to keep calling her child every 10 minutes to check up on her child. So, about like 5 or 6 calls in, calling her child every time, her child stopped answering the phone. So guess what? She started calling me, right? So I answered the phone and I said, oh, your child's fine, don't worry, everything's okay. Then she called a second time and then a third time. And remember by about the 5th time, I got so frustrated. I'm like, your child is fine, right? Of course, I was trying to be patient as best as I can. But you see, here's what's going on. Trust. It's so important. We need to learn to trust, to not be overly controlling. And that's what a good mother does, right? Just imagine this child. This child's feeling very embarrassed. And he shared with me directly too. He says, my mom's embarrassing me because she keeps constantly calling. You see, it's so important to give your child the distance he or she needs. When younger, it's more appropriate to give them guidance, give them direction. But by the time they're teenagers, for example, learn to give them some freedom and some independence. Stop being so controlling, in other words. Let me give you another example. I know a mother, or actually the child, the son, always complains about his mother. And what's going on is this guy's 18 years old, okay? 18 years old, and he can't go out at night past 10 p.m. And one time, he came home at around like 10:20 p.m. and his mom's sitting there. She's been sitting there for like over an hour, just looking at the entrance door. And then when he comes in, she starts screaming at him right away, right? At 18 years old, overly controlling. So this then can be an issue here as well. So if you are a mother and you can relate to what I've just shared, and you have the courage to admit that you're overly controlling, for example, just say a prayer. Say a prayer, something like, Lord, help me to learn to trust, help me to accept that you are truly in control. Grant me the peace in my heart, protect my child from all harm and danger. And that's it. As simple as that, right? You entrust it to the Lord. Now, the other approach is I have a mother who complained to me and says, you know what, my 30-year-old child can't do anything. And what I've learned is that the mother is so controls every aspect of this child's life that this child never learned about independence or about personal freedom. And then when I talked to this child personally, she complained on and on and on about how she wants to kill herself because her parents is so overly controlling. This is a problem. So be careful, be attentive to this point. Point number 5, be reasonable. And I think this is so crucial. I think this is so important too, that we learn to be reasonable in all regards, right? In all aspects. Set up rules and expectations that are reasonable. In other words, rules that make sense. When your child's younger, you want to give them more rules, more expectations so that they can follow. But then you also want to at the same time teach them responsibility by giving them more and more freedom as they grow older. Now, be sure not to be too strict on the one hand and too relaxed on the other. Let me give you an example. A mother has a 5-year-old child who loves to draw on the wall, right, with his crayon. Takes a crayon, draws on the wall all the time. One day, the mother sees her child drawing with the crayons on the wall, she came in and she started screaming at the child right away. Oh, bad kid, bad kid. Why are you drawing the wall? You're ruining my wall. Oh, this is so bad. Don't you ever, ever, ever do it again, right? And the child feels pretty bad. But then a week goes by, and of course, guess what happens? The child continues to draw with the crayon on the wall, right? And the way how the child does it too, draws on the wall and he looks at his mother, right? As he's doing it. But in this time, the mother learned. And so she came down to the level of her child and she says, son, you're a big boy now, right? And big boys don't draw on the walls. And you know what happened? From that moment on, her child never drew on the wall again, right? So reasonability and explaining your reasoning, explaining your rules, etc., right? That is age appropriate because children and their development, it can change so quickly. That's really important. So be reasonable. That's point number 5. Let's move on. Point number 4, be patient, right? Be patient. A good mother is always patient. And you know what? Being patient with children can be a very difficult thing to do. I totally understand, I can relate. Children have so much energy. They always run around. They love to jump around, do all sorts of random things. To be patient can be difficult. And when you can't get them to do what you want, when they don't listen to you, for example, when you have no control over them, control your emotions. Remind yourself to never get angry or scream back. Let me give you an example. A mother has a child who's 7 years old, right? And he's addicted to video games, like most child, right? Loves to play video game. And then mom says, you've been playing video games for 2 hours. Stop. And the child says, okay, 5 more minutes. And then 10 minutes goes by, and then mom comes in and says, okay, it's been 5 minutes. Now you got to stop. And says, oh, okay, 5 more minutes. And then next thing you know, 5 minutes turn into 30 minutes. And afterwards, mom just gets so frustrated. She gets mad. She comes in there, takes out away the video game and starts screaming at his child, right? That's probably not the best approach to do. And so be patient, right? On a certain level, of course, you set the rules, you set the standards, you say 5 minutes and make sure you keep to the 5-minute rule, right? And you explain to your child about it. And again, too, once the child grows older, like as a teenager, for example, you want to give them more freedom, more responsibility, etc. Okay, point number 3. We're getting to important points here. Point number 3, learn to forgive and to teach lessons. This is so important. This is so important. It's very clear and obvious as well, right? Forgiving a child for mistakes is really important. But from the mistakes too, you can also teach the child to learn how to grow and how to learn from those mistakes. That's what we do as adults. That's what we do as human beings. We always learn from our mistakes. It's a process, and you encourage your child to do precisely that. Let me give you an example. One day, a 4-year-old child wants to get some milk from the refrigerator, right? But since it's so high up, the child can't reach. So what does the child do? Takes a chair, pushes it to the refrigerator, climbs up on the chair, gets the milk, but the child's clumsy, right? Not paying attention, not being very careful, grabs the milk container and then spills it all over the floor, right? It fell down all over the floor. And of course, the child recognized his mistake, right? The mother is right there. And rather than screaming and saying, oh, what did you do? Why did you do this for? Etc., etc., mom is very patient and then simply says to the child, okay, now you know where the mop is. Let's go get the mop, get some towels, and let's clean it up together, right? Well, in the process, she's teaching her child, well, you made a mistake, yes. Now, time to fix the mistake, so to speak, right? There's so many ways to go about this, but forgiveness is important, is a key. And then also, too, teaching them lessons that come from those mistakes. Now, as your child grows older, it gets increasingly more complicated, right? Because the mistakes can be more difficult. But rather than focusing so much on the mistakes and the problems and the issues, focus on how to fix it and the lessons that your child can learn from it. That's the important point here. Point number 3, learning to forgive and to teach lessons from their mistakes. Point number 2, actually showing love and care. This is so important. I really truly believe it's so important. And there's 2 things from point number 2 here I'd like to share. Number 1 is love. About a year ago, I gave a talk to a group of parents, right? And I asked the parents, I asked them, do you love your child? Well, you know what? Every single parent says yes, right? Yes, I love my child. And then I asked them, okay, well, prove it. Prove that you love your child. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways you do that is to show love and affection, right? Actual physical love and affections like hugging, right? That's an example. It's very important that you show signs of affection, saying, I love you, for example, right? When's the last time you've done that to your child, right? Now, I know some parents say, well, it's not part of my culture to do that stuff, right? We don't show our affection. Okay, but as humans, we always feed on affections. We need affections. And so learn to love, to show love and to show affections, and to do that clearly, right? To show that you truly love your child. Now, there are so many other ways you can actually do that as well, too. Think about that. But I also want to emphasize this point is that like when you're cooking dinner, when you're cleaning the house, when you're washing their clothes, for example, you can do it with great love, right? And you know what? Children can tell. They can tell if you're showing them great love. If you're screaming and yelling at them all the time, saying, oh, clean up your room, it's such a mess, etc. Well, you know what? They'll do it, but they'll probably hate you or resent you for it, right? So how do you show love to your child while at the same time getting them to do what you want them to do? Now, part 2 of this is showing that you actually care rather than pretending that you care. And I think this is so important because I know there's a lot of full-time mothers working out there, right? Working full-time mothers. And sometimes we can all be so busy. And after coming home from work, for example, you can be tired and exhausted. And when your child comes and says, mommy, play with me, right? How do you respond? Do you say something like, no, I'm tired, go away, right? Or do you try to make the effort, and not just try to make the effort, but really do so, right? Now, I know many parents out there always complain and say, no, they're so busy, they don't have time for their kids, etc. Some parents even say, well, look, I'm making all this money for you. I'm putting food on the table. Without that, you won't have anything, right? Well, it makes the child feel bad. But you know what? Children want to have their parents around. Moms too, right? Very important. And so be present for your child and actually show that you truly care. Now, let me give you an example. I know a mother who takes her child to the movies, right? And after taking her child to the movies, she goes like this the whole time. It's very clear and obvious she doesn't care. And children can pick that up right away. They know that. And for children, you only have a finite, small amount of time window where you can actually show your child that you care, that you love them, and that you're there for them, right? Because by the time they're adults, it's almost pretty much impossible to correct. Now, point number 1, right? The very first point I want to share here that's so important of the 7 is faith. That's right, faith. You see, faith is a gift. It's one of the most precious gifts a parent can give to a child. It's a gift that truly grows with age and with time. You see, faith gives you direction and it gives you purpose in your life and in your child's life. When your child faces struggles, faces trials, faces difficulty in his or her life, it's faith that will carry your child through, especially in these most difficult times. Now, when you don't know where to go or what to do, faith is there to help you and to lead and to guide you through. The faith that the faith that a parent passes on to a child is so important, right? It teaches your child, you teach your child by passing on their faith how to live a good and a moral life. And this is a topic I love to expand on more because I can make a long video talking about faith and the gift of faith a parent passes on to a child. But this is really important. And so remember to teach your children faith, right? To have faith. And then finally, as we celebrate Mother's Day and our mothers, our moms who are always with us, who nourish us in the womb and who gave us birth and gave us life, let us also turn to our Blessed Mother right here, right? Our Blessed Virgin Mary. May she truly be our model, our example, our guide for us. Like any good model, role model, she points us on the way home to heaven. And so let us pray. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. May God bless you, and happy Mother's Day.